I think it's good to talk about like why we might get headaches or the eye strain, eye fatigue, why we might need to feel like we're blinking all the time during these activities, whether it's working on a computer or working on the desk on paper or reading a book. And what happens is if your ocular motor skills, if there's a deficit there, if they didn't develop or something happened and there's a regression in your ocular motor abilities for whatever reason, your brain has to process things like extra. And there's like an extra cognitive and physical load you have to compensate. And all of that combined can cause those migraines, those headaches, that strain, that fatigue, and then lead to avoidance.
Yeah.
All the things.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Just want to take a quick second to let you know about a live webinar we have coming up on July 16th at 1 p.m.
This is an early intervention webinar designed for parents with infants or toddlers, as well as therapists and other professionals working in the early intervention space, working with children birth to 3 years old.
We are going to teach you some really simple and effective sensory strategies and primitive reflex strategies to help your child thrive in those first few years of life.
This webinar is available for continuing education for OT practitioners after you take the webinar and pass the post-test.
You do get 0.2 AOTA CEUs, so make sure you get registered today, save your spot. You do get access to the recording to watch as well, and some really amazing freebies.
Yep, the link to register will be below.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're so happy to have you today. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica.
And we are going to start today's episode by just sharing a recent review we got on our podcast. This is from iTunes or Apple Podcasts. And we just really wanted to say thank you for leaving your feedback, sharing your thoughts, and leaving reviews, because it makes us so happy.
We get really excited.
You know, everybody else. So this one says, I just started listening, and my oh my, has this podcast helped me so much with my two boys getting more information and other ideas on how to help them. Definitely my favorite podcast at the moment.
Yay.
So we just appreciate you leaving reviews. So this is your reminder to just stop really quick and go leave a review. Let us know your thoughts and feedback.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about ocular motor skills today, but we're going to talk specifically for adults. A lot of the things we're going to talk about can pertain to children as well, but we're really going to focus on adults and ocular motor challenges.
And really the reason why we wanted to do this episode is because we have a personal connection with it. We have a coworker here at Harkla who was really struggling with headaches and just like debilitating headaches, migraines, and she was miserable for the longest time and she could not figure out what it was. And so she finally went to vision therapy and started doing vision therapy, started doing home exercise program activities, as well as some of the primitive reflex integration strategies, because this specific vision therapist incorporated some of the reflex side of things as well.
Well, and we recommended.
And we did
primitive
recommend
reflexes
it.
to her.
Yes. But she actually has made huge progress, and she's on maternity leave right now, so we can't like ask her in this moment how she's doing. But the last time that we chatted with her, she was done with vision therapy and was thriving.
Yeah, I think she was still having some challenges, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. You know, the majority of her workday is spent on a computer screen, but what she noticed was huge improvements in her migraines and her ability to complete work on the screen for longer periods of time without fatigue and headaches and those different challenges.
And they actually found out that her contact prescription was incorrect. And so I think finding that out as well. She was like, well, I've been squinting for so long. I've had a hard time seeing. And so having a different perspective as well, looking at that visual acuity side of things was helpful too.
Yeah. So I think first we want to talk about what ocular motor skills are, if you're unfamiliar or if you know what they are, and this could be just a really good refresher. But ocular motor skills are related to our eye muscles and our ability for both of our eyes to work together to complete tasks.
So the first one we're going to talk about is convergence and divergence. This one specifically focuses on bringing the eyes close together, going cross-eyed, and then away from the center of vision as well. So you think about following your finger all the way to your nose and then all the way away. Same thing goes for catching a ball, being able to visually track that ball towards you and then throwing it away from you as well.
Yep. And then the next one are saccades or saccades, however you want to pronounce it. And this is when both eyes can move smoothly and fluidly between two objects. So, we always give examples for kids, but let's think of an example for an adult. Right now, we have our podcast outline on a screen over here, and we have to be able to move our eyes back and forth between either each other or the camera and the screen and look back and forth and not lose our place, reading along the lines of our outline to make sure we don't get off track too far. What other examples of saccades are there for adults?
For adults, copying from the board. If you are at a work meeting and you're looking at your notes and you're looking up at the screen and it's far away, or looking between two objects, kind of judging the distance between the two objects. If you're maybe on a construction site, I don't think that we have any construction workers listening to our podcast, but you never know. If you are, shout out.
I guess.
But if you're like looking between the crane and the building and you're trying to make sure that you don't crash the crane into the building, you have to be able to look between the two objects. Okay, you can bring it closer, 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 closer. Okay, stop.
Yeah. That's a really good example.
Really intense example.
How did you come up with that?
I don't know.
That's great. And then the third area that we typically focus on in like OT and that they also focus on in vision therapy are visual tracking or visual pursuits. And this is being able to follow a moving object in your environment. Again, all of these need to be done with both eyes together smoothly and fluidly versus like jumping around, losing your place. So that's like the basics of ocular motor skills.
My example, we didn't talk about an example for that one, is always driving. And if you think about watching the cars and you're about to turn into oncoming traffic, you are watching them go and timing when it's safe to pull out in front of the traffic so you don't get in a car accident.
So some signs or symptoms of ocular motor challenges or deficits that we might see in adults. Again, some of this might pertain to children as well. The first one is difficulty reading. So if you are trying to read, do people still read newspapers?
No.
If you're trying to read a book or read, whether it's a like a real physical book or like on your Kindle, and you find that you're losing your place or you're having trouble following along the line, maybe the letters are even maybe jumping around a little bit, that could be a sign.
Yeah, and going along with losing your place, if you are copying something, you're looking up at a screen or your computer and you're writing something down, looking between those two spots, it might take you extra long time to, every time you look up at the board or the screen to find where you were at, you lose your place. And every time you have to start over, like, okay, looking between the screen, where was I? Oh, okay, the quick brown fox. Okay, the quick brown fox. Okay, where was I? Can you find it? And so on. So that's a big one as well. As well as the next one, headaches, migraines, fatigue, eye strain, squinting, any of those, I guess, more common challenges that an adult would be able to be aware of.
Yep. Another one would be poor depth perception. This goes into kind of our visual perceptual skills as well, but we do need good ocular motor control to be able to judge the distance between things, to be able to
think about that crane. You don't want to smash it into the building.
Make sure the crane doesn't smash into the building, to navigate your environment without bumping into things all the time. I mean, I'm a decently clumsy person person, so I bump into things, occasionally. But if you're finding that every single time you walk through that one doorway and you bump into the doorway every single time, that could be a sign.
Yes. And then also just feeling fatigued when you are reading, writing, copying from the board. If you notice that you're starting to avoid tasks like reading, like, oh, I used to love reading, or maybe reading has always been really hard, and you're like, oh, I just listen to audiobooks now. Like, you've learned to compensate, and you actually open a book and you try to read it and you're like, wow, this is really hard. It's taking me forever. I'm skipping over. I'm losing my place. I'm jumping around. And then dizziness, motion sickness, if you're really struggling with either moving your eyes on the page, looking up, looking down, and you're getting dizzy, or just feeling off during those tasks.
Yeah. And I mean, if you are getting dizzy a lot, I think like vertigo or frequent motion sickness, there could be a connection to ocular motor skills. I think that relates back to more of the visual vestibular system. There could be something neurological going on. Mm-hmm. But even with the visual vestibular system, there's still an ocular motor piece at play there too.
For sure. For sure. Yep. And then maybe if you are struggling with ADHD symptoms or difficulty focusing, and you just feel like you are trying to read something and you have to reread it over and over and over again in order for it to actually like make sense and for you to comprehend it. I feel like that happens to me often where I'm like, I'm not actually processing what I'm reading. I'm thinking about something else. I mean, we do have another episode on ADHD and vision. We should link that one as well, because that's its own topic that we've discussed. But those are just some common symptoms. And again, we are not vision therapy experts. We are OT practitioners who incorporate ocular motor activities and screenings and things into our sessions. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think it's good to talk about like why we might get headaches or the eye strain, eye fatigue, why we might need to feel like we're blinking all the time during these activities, whether it's working on a computer or working on the desk on paper or reading a book. And what happens is if your ocular motor skills, if there's a deficit there, if they didn't develop or something happened and there's a regression in your ocular motor abilities for whatever reason, your brain has to process things like extra. And there's like an extra cognitive and physical load. You have to compensate. And all of that combined can cause those migraines, those headaches, that strain, that fatigue, and then lead to avoidance.
Yeah.
All the things.
Yeah. Also think about how often we are on screens nowadays. Think about how dysregulating screen time can be, all of the blue light. Think about, we're tilting our heads down, our faces are in our phones, our faces are in our screens, our posture is poor. So if you think about it from like that holistic side of it, screen time is not helping the situation either.
Yeah, and I will say that I've noticed a huge difference. Anytime I'm on the screen for a long period of time, if I haven't looked up from the screen for a while, and then all of a sudden I look up at the real 3D world, it's a little disorienting at first, because I'm looking at this, is it 1D or 2D?
I don't know. D's aren't really my forte.
Well, three-dimensional.
I know. I don't know.
The screen is whatever it is, one-dimensional probably. And then you're looking at that for so long, you're getting that artificial light into your eyes and your brain, and then you look up at the 3D world, and it can be really disorienting and confusing. And so keeping that in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about primitive reflexes as well, because we've talked about how our coworker was doing some primitive reflex integration. They tested her reflexes. We know the significant impact that retained primitive reflexes have on ocular motor skills. And there's a few specific reflexes. I mean, they're all connected, but specifically the TLR, the tonic labyrinthine, the ATNR, asymmetrical tonic neck, and then symmetrical tonic neck, STNR. So those three play a key role in developing those ocular motor skills. And you think about the developmental milestones associated with those reflexes: tummy time, crawling,
rolling,
hand-eye coordination, rolling. So of course, there's going to be a connection there. And I think just keeping that in mind when we are addressing this from more of that holistic perspective, we should be addressing all of these areas, not just the ocular motor, not just the primitive reflexes. Sometimes you can work on integrating the primitive reflexes and the ocular motor skills will improve, but it really does require that whole approach of including everything.
Yep. So I think if you are listening to this, you're like, oh, I wonder if this is me because I have some of those signs that we just listed off. The first step is getting a functional vision assessment. And this is not going to be completed at the typical eye doctor where they test for visual acuity, where you get your contact or glasses prescription. This is going to be a specific optometrist, developmental optometrist, neuro-optometrist who specializes in vision therapy and ocular motor skills.
And you can talk to your regular eye doctor and say, hey, I really want to assess my ocular motor skills. I'm noticing X, Y, and Z. And see what they say. If they brush it off and they're like, oh no, that's not really a big thing, then maybe get a second opinion. Not maybe, get a second opinion, especially if you are struggling in some of these areas. But just know that it's a different set of training that is required to work on those ocular motor skills. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, so I think also in coordination to getting a vision assessment, which if you go to your vision assessment, they test you and they're like, yes, you could benefit from this. They're going to give you home exercise programs, but
or they're going to put you on a program.
Yep.
In office.
Yep. Well, both probably is what they typically will do, is both. And so that I think is really the best course of action.
I think so too.
If you get that done, that assessment done, and they say your ocular motor skills actually look pretty good, you're able to do all of these things, but you're still having some of those signs and symptoms, that's when we want to do other things. If you are working on a screen for the majority of your day, then incorporating frequent breaks from the screen, maybe setting a timer every 30 minutes. You get up and take a 5-minute break off the screen. Doesn't mean that you get on your phone to check your phone. It means you get off the computer and you go outside and you look at the real world and you get natural light in your eyeballs. And
you also crawl every day.
And then maybe you do some crawling as well. Crawl first thing in the morning, crawl after your afternoon lunch walk, crawl before bed. I think the big thing is taking a break off the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can make a huge impact. And that's also what our coworker, I almost said caregiver, that's what our coworker has implemented as well. She has a little timer on her desk. It goes off every 45 minutes. She gets up, she stretches, she rolls on that little rolly thing.
That little rolly thing. I know exactly what you're talking about. The description was funny.
And initially when she was doing that, it wasn't making that big of a difference. It wasn't until she started doing the vision therapy that made a huge difference. Yeah. So important to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have eye exercises, just implementing some simple eye exercises, things like pencil push-ups. So you're watching the pencil all the way to your nose. When it gets cross-eyed, then you push it away. So working on that convergence and divergence. I Can Learn, EYE Can Learn. The website used to be a really great website, and now it's kind of disappeared into the abyss. But there is a YouTube channel that I found that has some of those same activities on it that you can search for, and you can do some of those. I did them with my kids the other day, and they were like, oh, this is so fun, a computer. What is it?
Of course.
I know.
Of course.
I know.
Yeah, that can be a good tool to use.
Yeah.
Maybe not as a brain break.
No,
if you're working on a screen a lot.
No.
Doing more activities that require visual motor coordination, aka hand-eye coordination. So playing ball with your kids. That's the biggest one. Playing frisbee with your kids, throwing and catching. There's a lot of ocular motor happening with that. And, if you have kids or if you're a therapist working with kids, start doing this every single day.
Yep. And we've mentioned this, taking breaks, and setting your timer. There is a method. It's like
Pomodoro or something.
I want to say pomegranate, but it's Pomodoro.
Like Pomodoro.
Yeah, that's something that you should look into as well. Using visual hygiene strategies. So thinking about blue light blocking glasses. I wasn't allowed to wear these during our episode.
Because they look like sunglasses.
They're a little dark. But using
blue light blocking glasses.
Yes. Yes. So those can be helpful. I love Raw Optics. I'm going to shout out Raw Optics. That's what these are. They have the blue sync, they have the yellow daytime, and then they have the red glasses for nighttime as well. So that can be helpful for your visual hygiene.
Yep. Look into primitive reflexes. We have a ton of content on primitive reflexes. We gear a lot of it towards children, but it can also be used for adults as well. So search up our content on our podcast or YouTube channel. You can even check out our digital course on primitive reflexes, and you can start incorporating some primitive reflex work into your routine. The awesome thing about primitive reflex integration is that there's no negative side effects. You know,
there are initially, but not.
Hold on. It can't, if you're implementing like a full primitive reflex program, specifically with a child, typically, you can see regression potentially, but I'm talking about if, you know, you're an adult and you decide to do some crawling, some Superman banana exercises, and some lizard crawls, and you do those every single day, maybe once a day, maybe twice a day if you're really ambitious. There's not going to be any negative side effects.
Correct. Yes.
It's not like something that you take and there's 10 different side effects.
Yes. I just know that we've gotten a comment before in the past where it's like, no negative side effects. Well, and then they were like, well, my child got a little bit crazier, you know, when we started doing these. And like, that's normal. It's like working out and you get sore. Your brain gets sore when you're doing these activities initially. And then we're going to strengthen and improve.
I wonder though what the difference is for adults.
True. I don't know.
I feel like there would be less of the regression period.
Yes.
But I don't know.
I don't know.
That's my claim. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's what I believe.
And then last thing is don't be afraid to look into vision therapy. I think the biggest downside with vision therapy is it is not typically covered with insurance or covered by insurance. So it's a pretty big investment up front, but
you can go get the assessment and rule it out at least.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
So yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful. We do have a listener question we want to leave you with and talk about and brainstorm today. So here it is. My son is 7 years old who has unintegrated primitive reflexes. I'm an OT and have helped integrate his reflexes, ATNR, STNR, spinal galant. Once the reflexes were integrated, he no longer wet the bed and his attention and focus improved significantly. Woo woo! Just love that. This past month, he has started to have a really hard time focusing at school. He's more impulsive and now becoming more angry over things that didn't bother him before. I rechecked his primitive reflexes and they are back to being unintegrated. Is this going to be a constant battle his whole life? Is it normal for integrated reflexes to be unintegrated again? Does he have to go through the entire program to integrate his reflexes again? Any suggestions you have with attention and impulsivity and bouts of anger would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. From Lucy.
Yes. So, Lucy, what the research shows is that children with, I don't think that she said he has a diagnosis, but let's use autism for an example. For an autistic child, for an autistic adult, that neurological condition generally, I hate saying generally, but most often we do have to continue with exercises on a pretty consistent basis in order for optimal functioning.
Now, if this boy doesn't have a diagnosis, there still might be something going on. You know, our primitive reflexes are located in our brain. So we know that it's neurological in, you know, certain ways. So we did talk about this on another podcast episode where we talked about a maintenance program for primitive reflexes. So it might be, you know, he's 7 years old. He's going through a lot of changes in his body, his hormones as he's growing and learning. There could be new challenges that he's facing at school. And when those things happen, those reflexes could kick back in as a protective response, potentially. So my recommendation is always, you've gone through the integration program, you've seen a lot of progress. That doesn't mean to totally stop and never do the exercises again. I compare it to, working out and building muscle. You don't go through a 3-month workout program, build a ton of muscle, lose body fat, feeling great, and you're like, oh, I made so much progress, I'm going to stop because I've seen the positive benefits and results that I wanted. I'm going to stop forever. No, you want to keep going. You want to keep using the tools and strategies, the exercises on a consistent, regular basis because they are so good for the brain and the body. So for the ATNR, maybe you incorporate, maybe for the ATNR and the STNR, you incorporate crawling and reading charts on a daily basis. For spinal galant, maybe you do sit walks every day for transitions, whatever it is. And you have kind of like a maintenance program that you create and you do it as a family. The other thing is attention, impulsivity, bouts of anger. There's a lot of executive function challenges and emotional intelligence challenges that are happening. So definitely having an impact from those reflexes, but also start incorporating, if you aren't already, an emotional intelligence program like zones of regulation and using sensory strategies and tools.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on that, in addition to zones of regulation, the Superflex, the Superflex, social thinking. I think social thinking is the brand.
Yeah, it could be.
But yeah, the book's on, why am I?
It's Superflex.
Superflex. Yeah. And the Team of Unthinkables. Oh, yeah. That book is great for like older kiddos, especially older boys, older girls, because it's more of like a storyline and more character driven. So that could be something to look at if you haven't already done so. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Let us know. This is a pretty common question we get, and it's a great question. And we're really proud of you for working so hard to integrate the reflexes, and we're glad that you saw the positive changes. That's amazing. I would just continue and talk to him about it too. Like, hey, these exercises that we're doing, they're really beneficial for our brain. It's like our daily workout. We'll do them all together. I think incorporating it into just, this is our daily brain exercise. We work out our body, we work out our brain, and we carry on with our day.
Yeah, and you can take a day off here and there. It's okay to rest.
For sure.
Yeah. If you have a question that you want us to answer on the podcast, you can fill out the form that is linked below in the show notes.
And we appreciate, like we said at the beginning, your feedback, your reviews. They truly mean the world to us. You can leave them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube.
Yep. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you share this video with a friend. Yeah, that's it.
And with that, we'll plan on seeing you next Wednesday for another podcast.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes, or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.